This is the game that I kind of always thought I wanted. You know, I've wanted like a sports RPG for a long time because I play too many sports games and I don't play enough RPG games and role-playing games. I don't play enough role-playing games is my point. And whenever I try to get into an RPG, I get like 8, 10, 12 hours in and then I fall off. Meanwhile, I'm like 90 plus hours into every stupid sports sim that I put into a game console by the end of the month. And Golf Story really seemed like that. And it's also so rare for a story about sports, or even a game about sports, to get to the heart of what a sport is in the way that Golf Story tries. It doesn't quite get there. It gets very close. It gets very close, like dangerously close, but I think just the nature of being the way that it is, being kind of a more family-friendly comedy game, it's not going to get at the heart of what makes golf truly the fascinating, in both positive and negative ways, sport that it is. Before this, I would say that the best sports RPG I ever played was NBA 2K15, which is not an RPG in any sense of the... Well, in most senses of the word, let's say. It's about 90% yearly sports sim and 10% some RPG aspects. In the My Career mode, you had like a story that I liked. You came up as this undrafted free agent right out of college, and you got picked up on a 10-day contract, and you worked your way up to NBA stardom and fame. But that was a sports sim. I mean, on the box, it was NBA 2K15. This was not being sold for its RPG elements. This was a basketball game that had like a neat little story mode tacked on. No, what Golf Story is that's the closest thing to a melding of the two genres I've ever seen. And part of that is because the golfing in the game is not like mind-blowingly good. It's like an average golf game at most. It doesn't offer anything that even like the original NES Golf had. And I have that box. Golf Story seems to understand what the NES Golf had going for it. In fact, when I bought Golf Story, it was concurrent. It was the first game I bought on my Switch. In fact, kind of the reason why I bought a Switch was because I knew Mario Odyssey was coming and I wanted to play that, and because Golf Story seemed like a game that I had always wanted. It's like one of those games that back in 2010 when that NBA Jam reboot came out, or like when Skate 3 came out, I was like, oh, I always knew I wanted this. Like, it's like I dreamt it into reality, which is a lyric from a Savage Garden song. I think I dreamed you into life. And so I tend to offhandedly refer to games that seem like something I would really want as Savage Garden games. And I know that's embarrassing, and it should be, and I am embarrassed, but it's a shorthand and it works fine for what it was. I think what I always wanted was a game that made me feel something with golf, and that's not even the main reason why I got Golf Story, but just a game that could really tie together a story and a sport. Since 2009, it's been nearly 10 years. It's been nearly a decade since the ESPN 30 for 30 series of documentaries started coming out. And I've been fascinated every time about the real-life opera that sports represents. There's something so fascinating about it to me because all of the athletes that get portrayed in those documentaries, the Evander Holyfields, the Bo Jacksons, the Ben Johnsons, they were all real people. They all came out of real places. And the stories told, they really happened. And part of that's why I like documentaries in general. I'm not breaking anybody's mind by telling you that what's so fascinating about sports is the fact that it actually happens. These games have their own inner canon to them. Every basketball game is going to tell some sort of story, and that's acted out by players who aren't necessarily there to tell their own story. They're there to play the game. I don't know where the fuck I'm going. When Tiger Woods was at the Masters in April of 2018, it was a man playing a game of golf. But it was also a man we hadn't seen play well for years, coming back and potentially making his first major impact on a major tournament. A man whose celebrity was at the height of celebrity status in golf, potentially the most famous golfer in the history of the game of golf, at least in the modern history of the game of golf. A man whose fame fell so quickly and so chaotically in this car crash of bad press and infidelity and a literal car crash and bad golf and injuries, to the point where we hadn't heard of him. Well, we had heard of him, to the point where we hadn't heard from him in his most famous arena in nearly a decade. And he was back on this main stage playing what would go into a Wikipedia article or a box score as one man playing a game of golf at a course he'd played many times before. But the theater around that was so fascinating. It had my eyes on the set, despite the fact that he was doing really pretty much a mediocre job. I mean, he was not even in the I don't think he even made the cut on the last day, if I'm not mistaken. Mike will back me up. Comment in the comments, Mike, if I got that wrong. But it's for that reason, the fact that stories developed around an apparatus in sports, that a man throwing a football or hitting a golf ball or shooting a basketball or doing a kickflip indie on an X Games ramp can mean so much more than what that actual function is why I'd like to see more sports RPGs. What I'm saying basically is that I put way too much of my hopes on Golf Story being all of that, and what I got was a really good comedy sports RPG. Things that I would love, but this game was never going to be what I needed. But there's still a lot that I loved about Golf Story. Golf Story got so many aspects of what golf is completely right. Golf is a sport of gatekeeping. There's no way to parse this in a way that's, like, friendly, but it tends to be the rich people who you see out on the golf course. That's just kind of how it is. Or it tends to be the middle class. Like, I grew up relatively upper middle class, and I took a golf lesson. So I guess I couldn't say I was like a country club member. I never grew up playing golf. But my grandparents belonged to a country club, and we'd go to this country club to eat dinner every now and then. And I remember thinking it was so fancy, but when I was a child, I never knew what the actual function of the country club was until I was older and realized, like, this was kind of a place built to keep other people out. Golf is a sport of gatekeeping. It doesn't necessarily need to be. In an ideal world, I guess you could maintain golf courses on like a public parks sort of sense. And Golf Story actually touches on gatekeeping, though, is what I've been trying to say and failing to say for the past 10 minutes. Of course, the gatekeeping in Golf Story is sanitized. You're never kept out of a course because of your class background or your racial background or anything of the sort. You're only ever kept out of a course until you can prove that you're good enough to play there. The most tightly kept course is a course called Tidy Park. It's the second to last course in the game, and there's a fascinating little bit of irony to it, that this course, while it is so tightly guarded by 5 or 6 elderly gentlemen, and they're the only people who play on the course, and they're all pretty bad at golf, and they consider a bogey or a double bogey to be a good shot on most holes, and are astonished when you have the audacity to go out and birdie or par on some holes. They keep everyone out of this golf course. And when you finally get past all of these ridiculous hoops to get into the golf course, you find that the course is worn out. The course is beaten down over years of use, and it's not kept up well. It's mostly sand trap, fairway, and there's no greens. There's puddles everywhere. In fact, you need to have a special club with a hole in it designed to hit balls out of puddles. In fact, you need to have a special club designed to hit balls out of puddles with a hole in it called the puddle wedge. It's portrayed comically, like these men are obviously absurd for doing this, but golf is a sport where oftentimes you're told you can't get in, and then once you get in, it's not all that much. I know a lot of people who would have no interest in golf, and yet at the same time didn't have the upbringing to put them on the track to being interested in golf. Which is a shame, because I think it's a great sport. Golf Story also recognizes what makes it a great sport. Golf is one of the few sports where a team of coaches and supporters can come around an athlete, a singular athlete, and see them succeed and feel some bit of that success in themselves. Golf Story conveys this very well, actually. Your coaches, your trainers at your home course, they are with you the entire way. They support you the entire way, and they push you towards the greatness that you achieve at the end of the game, where you become a pro. Not to spoil anything, that's the entire point of the game, is to become a golf pro. And the characters of Golf Story all kind of come through you. They all teach you little bits about the game that you end up using on your own. And I love that. I love how one person, your character, who probably has the least personality of any character in the game, I think to a point, because you're supposed to identify with them, your character learns so much from them, and actually you see that mechanically come through in the game. Your coach teaches you the hot potato shot, where you throw the ball up in the air and hit it very quickly, and you use that at points. You have coaches who teach you how to hit properly out of traps, how to dig for dinosaur bones, how to hit out of puddles, all that sort of thing, and that comes through. You end up using that as the game goes on in surprisingly different ways. I thought there would be kind of a gimmick where, you know, there's a dinosaur course, for example, and on that dinosaur course, I call it a dinosaur course. It is a course where there are dinosaur bones. I don't know how to define that, like an archaeology themed course. I don't know how to really put that in to the proper words. You learn how to dig for bones with your digging wedge. And I thought, as I was playing it, okay, this is just like a gimmick, we're gonna get through this here and never use it again. But you use that time and time again. There's stuff to dig for. And the variety of courses is fascinating as well, because that draws on a certain type of retro aesthetic that the game seems to strive for. The courses in the game are varied, but a little bit cliche, but in kind of a nice way. It's like a callback. It's like a good callback rather than just like a reference, like a Ready Player One, like surface level reference. The courses are, you know, you've got your standard green grass, white sands, blue water sort of course, is what we expect from every golf course in the real world, but it's, you know, like a fun little video game, and you've got a beach course, and you've got a snow course, and as I've tried to find the word for, you've got like an archaeology themed course, and a haunted house themed course. Which I like that too, because that involves the heart of what retro video games have going for them. In that same sense, those sort of like cliche levels we always expect. I think of like the Super Mario 64, Shifting Sand Land, Big Boo's Haunt, Lethal Lava Land, those like fence posts from which our level design gimmicks come from. Those are in the game as well, and I like how that's translated. So it ties what I like about retro video games and what I like about golf together, and to one very nice hand gesture here. Also fascinating is how similar this is to the NES golf game that I mentioned earlier. The shot meter is virtually exactly the same as this game from 1985. And really, when you think about it, golf games haven't changed that much. And to be fair, the sport of golf hasn't changed that much. It's going to be the same basic rules as it was 50, 60, I don't know when golf was founded. St. Andrews, Scotland, whatever he was writing down. The hitting meter, though, is basically exactly the same. You hit once for your power, and then hit that, and then it comes back and you hit for your accuracy. It's 3 taps of a button. And it works very well, just as well as it always did. I like how they didn't try to change anything. They still got the soul of what was so good about the original NES golf games, and so many golf games that have come past that. Because ultimately, the golfing in this game isn't all that important. I mean, it's important to be the mechanic through which the story is told, but the golfing in this game could have just been decent, and it was just decent. Like, it could have been the best golf game in existence, but if the story was mediocre, they put a lot on the story of the game. I mean, it's in the title of the game. The game is Golf Story. There are 2 parts to it, and the golf is good, and so you know you've got 50% of it, and the 50% there is going to max out at about 50% being a decent game. It could be the best fucking golf game in the history of the world. If the story wasn't good, it would still be like kind of mediocre. I still would have played through like 8 hours of mediocre comedy. 18 hours. I would have played through like 18 hours of mediocre comedy, and most of the comedy gets there. There is like a rap battle scene that goes on for way too long, and a lot of the jokes are like Australian themed, so I didn't get them. In fact, one of the last core concepts of the game that I missed the entire way through the game because I'm not Australian is the fact that this game's also sort of a love letter to the country/continent of Australia. At the same time, there's like slapstick, which you don't see almost ever in video games, but the idea of somebody getting hit in the face with a golf ball is almost always going to be very funny. And while we're on the topic of comedy, there is satire. Most of it's like relatively toothless. You get some satire about the media, about how pros are like self-centered and how the media only focuses on the major pros. Even like when you win against a pro, they're gonna interview the pro first and then give you like 10 seconds of interview time or stuff like that. Pretty simple, like borderline baseline stuff. I don't know, I didn't expect for like a scathing criticism of what golf was. I didn't expect for like a diatribe on racism in the golfing community. And probably most interesting is the fact that I beat it. I got to the end of it. I finished that game. This is probably the first RPG I've finished in years. And so I owe a little bit to it for that, and I'm hoping in my heart of hearts that that pushes me towards playing more RPGs as the years go by. But I hold out hope, and so many times before I've disappointed myself by starting up another ESPN NFL 2K5 franchise. And shit, I'm currently in the middle of one right now. It sounds redundant, because it is redundant to say that Golf Story is a story about golf, because Golf Story is a story about golf, and that's kind of the point. But I want to look at that title, Golf Story, not as two parts, but two parts that play into each other and combine, as I do with my hands here. Here we go. Golf Story is not just a golf game. It is a story about why golf is good. And I hope that comes through right. And this has been a messy, monologue-ish video. I don't know if this is going to be the way that I do the rest of my videos, but I had so many thoughts about this game as I came to the end of it. I basically bought a Switch for it. And I wanted to talk about it, and every time I try to talk about it, it comes out like a little bit flat. There's so many different opportunities I have, like, let's tie this to what golf is, let's tie the game to what the sport is, and for the first time, this is like my bag, you know, like sports video games are my thing, and for the first time, it really seemed like there was a game that knew what I was looking for and wanted to be what I was looking for, that could get that like sort of melodrama around sports so right in the way that no Spike Lee Living to Dream ever could get to. And they came close, and I appreciate it for that. And while it's what I have, while maybe it's a settling sort of thing, maybe my expectations are too high for it, I still really appreciated what Golf Story was.